What would you do if the people who were supposed to protect your child were the ones who hurt him? And what if, in that moment, not a single person in the room stood up for him, not even his own grandparents? My name is Lauren. I was 26 years old, a single mom working double shifts at a diner in Portland, Oregon, scraping together just enough to keep my son Noah fed and safe. Noah was 8. Quiet, gentle, the kind of kid who colored inside the lines and never asked for more than he needed. He had learned early that silence meant safety. I didn't teach him that. Life in my parents' house did. We had moved in 3 months earlier after I lost our apartment. I had no car, no savings, and nowhere else to go. My parents' house was the only option, and I use the word option loosely. My mother, Diane, ran that house like a courtroom where the verdict was always already decided. My father, Richard, said nothing about anything, ever. And my older sister, Kara, treated every room she walked into like a stage built just for her. I had spent 26 years being called too sensitive, too emotional, too much, and not enough, all at the same time. That evening, I was at the kitchen sink, hands deep in soapy water, back aching from a full day of watching Noah while the rest of the family watched TV in the next room. Noah was in the corner of the living room, coloring quietly, keeping to himself the way he always did. Then it hit me. A thick, floral scent cutting through the air, sharp and suffocating. And then the scream. "Mom! Mommy, my eyes! I can't see!" I dropped the plate. It shattered on the tile. I ran. Noah was curled on the floor, both hands pressed against his face, red seeping through his small fingers. I dropped to my knees beside him, frantically trying to pull his hands away, voice breaking. "Baby, look at me! What happened?" But he couldn't. He just kept screaming. That's when I heard her voice, flat and unbothered from somewhere behind me. "He stared at me too long," Kara said, holding up a designer perfume bottle like it was Exhibit A. Freaked me out, so I gave him a little lesson in boundaries. I snatched the bottle from her hand. From the couch, Diane let out a short laugh, chips bowl still in her lap. "At least he smells better now." Richard didn't even look up from his newspaper. Kara tilted her head and added, "Boys like him always grow up creepy anyway." Something inside me went completely still, and then shattered. I scooped Noah into my arms, ran to the bathroom, and locked the door behind us. I flushed his eyes with lukewarm water over and over, hands trembling, whispering his name like a prayer. His screams softened into sobs, then shudders, then silence. Not peace, just surrender. We stayed on that bathroom floor all night, his small body curled into mine, and me staring at the ceiling, feeling something I had never felt before. The absolute, unshakable certainty that we would never be safe in this house again. When morning came, the light crept under the bathroom door like it had no idea what had happened on the other side of it. Noah was still asleep against my chest, his breathing slow and shallow, his eyes swollen almost shut. I hadn't slept at all. I had spent the whole night watching him breathe, running my fingers through his hair, and making a decision I should have made a long time ago. Then came the knock. Kara's voice drifted through the door, casual and unbothered, like she was reminding me about laundry. "Mom says you're being dramatic again. He's fine." I said nothing. A few minutes later, heavier knocking. Diane this time, sharper, impatient. "You'd better come out before you flood my damn floor with those tears. You always were the sensitive one. No wonder Kara turned out stronger." I stood up slowly, unlocked the door, and opened it. Neither of them said a word when they saw Noah's face, pale as paper, eyes swollen and red, blinking slowly in the hallway light. No apology, no flinch, nothing. I walked past both of them without a word, and started packing our things. That's when Diane stepped in front of me. "You're not leaving. You've got rent due, and we feed you here. You have nowhere to go." I looked at her and said, "That is my son." She looked right back at me and said, "He's a burden. He always has been." I turned to Richard, sitting in his armchair, newspaper open across his lap. He didn't look up. He just turned the page. And that was the moment I stopped waiting for anyone in that house to save us. We walked out the front door into the pale, freezing December morning in Portland. No car, no money, nowhere lined up, just Noah's small hand in mine and whatever was left of my will to keep moving. I carried him most of the 5 miles to the nearest urgent care, his arms wrapped around my neck, his face pressed into my shoulder, not saying a single word the whole way. When the nurse looked at his eyes and asked what had happened, I said, "He was attacked." She looked up. "By who?" I paused for just a second. "Family." It was the first time I had ever said it out loud, and the word landed like a stone dropped into still water. The doctor confirmed chemical irritation, no permanent damage, thankfully, but he would need antibiotic eye drops for 10 days. I used $31, every last cent I had, to fill the prescription. With the $3 left, I bought Noah a small loaf of bread. That night, we slept on an old mattress in the garage of my coworker Marcus, the air thick with motor oil, a single yellow bulb flickering through the gap under the door. Noah curled up beside me and whispered into the dark, "Is the mean lady coming back?" I pulled him closer and said, "No, baby, she's gone." But even as the words left my mouth, my hand tightened into a fist against the cold floor beneath us. The garage floor was behind us, but the weight of everything we had survived was still very much with us. In the weeks that followed, I went back to the Silver Spoon Diner, and I worked. I scrubbed dishes until the skin on my knuckles cracked and bled. I refilled coffee cups for people who never once looked me in the eye. I smiled at every table, nodded at every complaint, and carried their plates with steady hands, while inside, I was full of something sharp and broken, like shards of glass pressing against my ribs with every breath. My family never called, not once. And one afternoon, while I was on break staring at a cracked wall tile, I saw Kara had posted a new photo on social media. Fresh makeup, soft lighting, a caption that read, #HealingEra. I put my phone face down and went back to work. Noah was struggling in ways I didn't have words for yet. He flinched every time someone laughed too loud. He stopped making eye contact with strangers. He stopped drawing altogether. And for a kid who used to fill entire notebooks with superheroes and spaceships, that silence was louder than anything he could have said out loud. One night, after closing, I stood alone in the back stockroom, staring at my phone, scrolling through the numbers for the police, for Child Protective Services, for anyone who might listen. But a voice, quiet, familiar, and 26 years old, whispered that they would cover for each other. They always had. I had spent my entire childhood being the difficult one, the dramatic one, the one who couldn't just let things go. Reporting them wouldn't bring justice. It would just bring a fight I wasn't equipped to win yet. I looked at Noah asleep on Marcus's old mattress, his face finally soft and still in the dark. And I made a decision so quietly it barely made a sound. I was not going to run. I was going to rise. I didn't need the world to punish them. I needed to build something they could never take from us, and I would do it myself. So I worked doubles at the diner. I cleaned houses on weekends. I took overnight babysitting jobs when I could get them. 3 months later, I had enough to rent a small room above an auto shop in East Portland. 1 window, 1 mattress, no privacy to speak of. But it was ours, and it was quiet. And quiet felt like oxygen after everything we had been through. Noah started drawing again. Every single superhero he drew had one eye closed. I signed him up for free group therapy sessions at the Bridges Youth Center, and slowly, week by week, I watched my son come back to me. He stopped flinching. He started calling me Mama again instead of just whispering when he needed something. Meanwhile, every evening after my shift, I dropped Noah at the center's aftercare program and walked to the Portland Adult Learning Center, where I took courses in child psychology, trauma response, and family abuse patterns. I didn't know exactly where it was leading. I just knew that rage alone wasn't enough. I needed to understand precisely what had been done to us, so I could dismantle it, piece by piece. One evening, walking Noah home from his session, he looked up at me and said, "You're like a superhero, Mom." I shook my head and said, "I don't have powers, baby." He looked straight at me and said, "Yes, you do. You protect." I didn't cry right then. But later that night, after he fell asleep, I opened a notebook and wrote 2 sentences that I have never forgotten. I will never let anyone laugh at his pain again. I will rebuild us from the ground up. Those 2 words I wrote in that notebook, rebuild us, became the only plan I needed. Over the next 2 years, I did exactly that. I earned my certification as a trauma support aide. I started volunteering at the Bridges Youth Center, the same place that had once helped Noah find his voice again. And eventually, I was offered a full position as program coordinator at Riverside Elementary, working with children who had survived abuse and needed someone in their corner who truly understood what that meant. I never posted about any of it. I never announced my progress or sent updates to anyone from that house. I just worked, and I grew, and I waited. Because I had learned something important. The most powerful moves are the ones made in complete silence. Then, quietly, the world started doing what I never asked it to do. Screenshots of Kara's old social media posts began circulating through parent groups across Portland. Videos where she mocked children with disabilities, and an audio clip of her own voice describing, in detail and without a trace of remorse, what she had done to Noah's eyes. I did not post those things publicly, but I knew people who did. People who had seen enough and were done staying quiet. Within weeks, Kara lost 2 beauty sponsorship deals. Her boyfriend ended things after someone forwarded him the audio file. She uploaded a tearful video in response, looking directly into the camera and saying, "I genuinely cannot believe how sensitive people are nowadays." The comment section did not go easy on her. One comment summed up what thousands were thinking. "Your nephew isn't sensitive. You are a monster." The internet had a long memory, and it had finally caught up with her. Not long after, Richard walked into the Silver Spoon Diner and sat down in the corner booth like he owned the place. I recognized the back of his head the moment I came out of the kitchen. He ordered a coffee without looking at me and said, "Still working here? Thought you'd have come crawling back by now." I refilled his cup and said nothing. Then he leaned back and added, "Your mom's birthday is coming up. You planning on coming?" I looked at him and said, "No." He let out a short laugh. "Still holding a grudge over that little perfume thing?" I set the coffee pot down slowly. It was cologne. He shrugged. "What's the difference?" I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Ask your grandson." Something shifted in his expression, just for a second, a flicker of something that might have been shame, before his face hardened back into contempt. "You think you're better than us now?" I picked up the coffee pot, turned away, and said over my shoulder, "No, Richard, I know I am." I walked back to the kitchen and never looked back. What came next, I had not engineered, but I will not pretend it didn't feel like the world finally correcting itself. Richard's mother, Eleanor, had passed away 6 months earlier. In her final weeks, she had quietly reached out to me. We sat together in her small living room, and she took my hand and said, "You remind me of myself when I was young, strong, unwanted, unbreakable." She had rewritten her will before she died, leaving her entire estate, including the house where my parents had lived for years, not to me, but directly to Noah. When the will was read aloud, Diane choked on her own breath and screamed, "That little mute brat!" The attorney looked up from his paperwork, completely calm, and said, "That little mute brat now owns the house you are currently sitting in." My phone rang for 3 days straight. I let every call go to voicemail. When I finally answered, Diane's voice was unrecognizable, thin, shaking, stripped of every ounce of the arrogance I had grown up fearing. "Please," she said, "we're being kicked out. You cannot let this happen. Noah doesn't even understand what a will is." I looked out through the window at Noah on the small balcony of our East Portland room, bent over his sketchbook, completely absorbed, completely at peace. I thought about the bathroom floor. I thought about Marcus's garage. I thought about $31 and a loaf of bread. And then I said 2 words. You laughed, and I hung up. They thought that hanging up the phone meant I was afraid. They were wrong. 2 weeks later, Kara filed a legal petition to contest Noah's inheritance, claiming in official documents that I was emotionally unstable, vindictive, and had manipulated a vulnerable elderly woman through guilt and calculated deception. She even alleged I was using my own son as a financial instrument. I read every word of that filing and felt nothing except a deep, settled calm. Because I had not been sitting still all this time. I had been preparing. When I walked into that courtroom, I did not walk in alone. Behind me were Noah's therapist, a licensed social worker, 2 teachers from Riverside Elementary, and the volunteer coordinator from Bridges Youth Center. Richard did not appear. The chair where he should have been sitting stayed empty the entire morning. One by one, the people who had actually watched us rebuild our lives took the stand and told the truth. Noah's therapist leaned toward the microphone and said clearly, "Noah came to us afraid to make eye contact with anyone in the room. He now speaks openly to other children and initiates conversation. That did not happen by accident." One of his teachers said, "She never once asked for recognition. Every time we spoke, she asked what else she could do for him." The Bridges coordinator looked directly at the judge and said, "Every hour she was not working a paid shift, she was sitting beside someone else's child, helping them feel safe." The room was quiet in a way that felt like weight. Then Kara stood up, smoothed her jacket, and offered the judge a smile that I recognized immediately. The same smile she had given right before she said something cruel. "I just don't think someone who carries a grudge this long should be in control of that much money," she said pleasantly. "I mean, this is supposed to be about Noah, isn't it?" The judge looked at her for a long moment and said, "Miss Donnelly, do you understand that this hearing is not concerned with your personal feelings, but with the well-being of a child?" The smile disappeared. She glanced at her attorney. She did not look at me. When the gavel came down, the ruling was final. Noah's inheritance would remain in a protected trust until he turned 18, with me named as sole administrator. Kara, Diane, and Richard were each issued a restraining order citing a documented pattern of emotional harm, online harassment, and past abuse. As I stood to leave, Diane pushed through the aisle toward me, her voice cracking with rage. "You evil little witch! How dare you do this to your own blood?" I stopped walking. I turned my head just far enough to look at her one last time and said, "You made Noah bleed. I'm just making sure no one ever does again." Then I walked out of that courtroom and never looked back. In the years that followed, Noah took piano lessons and actually loved them. He made real friends, stood up straight, and laughed the way kids are supposed to laugh, freely, without checking the room first. He wrote a story once, a superhero story, about a villain who sprayed fire at children's eyes because their innocence made her feel small. I asked him what happened to the villain at the end. He thought about it and said, "She wasn't defeated." I asked, "Then what happened?" He looked up and said simply, "She was forgotten." We moved into a small, sun-filled apartment on the quiet edge of Portland, and we never went back to the old house. Not once. The best revenge was never the money, and it was never the exposure. It was waking up in a home where silence meant peace and laughter meant joy. It was watching Noah exist in a world where the people who once hurt him no longer had any place in it. And in that quiet, ordinary, beautiful life, they became exactly what they had always deserved to be. Nothing.